Good morning. We're going through very, very difficult times with disasters and so on, and things are probably going to get worse, and our faith will be tested. So how are we going to get through these things? How can we strengthen our faith? There's a lovely account in the book of Daniel, about 2,600 to 500 years ago, and the scene is this. Daniel had just interpreted a dream of Nebuchadnezzar's, and as a reward he was given a very high position in government. And Daniel requested that his three friends, that's Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah, three Hebrews, be given positions in government too, because they were good workers and Daniel knew he could trust them. Now, in this account, which is in Daniel chapter 3, for some reason, Daniel doesn't figure in it, just the three Hebrews, and Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah, on their own. Whether Daniel was exempt because he was so high in government, or whether he was on a diplomatic mission, we don't know. Anyway, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, set up a huge image, about 30 meters high, 3 meters wide, probably timber overlaid with gold. It was huge. And the instructions were this, that all the government officials were to come to this plain of Dura, probably a nice flat, dry place. There were plenty of them around Babylon. And all these government officials, that is the governors, the judges, the treasurers, the councillors, the sheriffs and the lawyers and everybody, great and small, were all to come and bow down to the inauguration of this image. Whether this was to cultivate loyalty to Nebuchadnezzar, it doesn't say. And the herald cries out and says that as soon as you hear the music from this great orchestra, that's pipes and harps and bagpipes and so on, when you hear this orchestra strike up, then you're to bow down. And if you don't, then you'll be thrown into this fiery furnace. So there's a huge incentive to bow down to this image. And that's what happened. The music starts and they all bow down. Now, there were some officials among these government men who were not very nice. They were of Chaldean descent, and it seems that they were jealous of Daniel and his three friends because they were Babylonians. And Daniel and these three Hebrews had been given positions probably above them. So they decided they were going to cause a bit of mischief. They go to Nebuchadnezzar and they say, you know that three of these Hebrews, that's Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah, they didn't bow down to the image when the music played. The king gets really angry and he summons these three Hebrews. Now, he knows them well and he likes them, they're good workers, so he decides he's going to give them a second chance. He said, when you hear the music and if you bow down to the image, then well and good. But if you don't, then I will throw you into the fiery furnace. And here the king says something very silly. He said that he would throw them into the fiery furnace, and who is the God that can deliver you out of my hands? Well, he was about to find out which God could deliver these three Hebrews. So Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah say to the king, look, we don't really have to say anything to you about this. We cannot bow down to your image. But our God, if he wishes, he can deliver us from this fire. But if not, we are not going to bow down to this image. It would be against the Mosaic law. It would upset their God, and it would destroy all the faith that they had. God would not be pleased with them, and that would have been worse than the anger of the king. Now, these three men are facing very scary times. They're facing their deaths in a horrible fiery furnace, and they had the very real prospect of dying, but it didn't matter. They were not going to bow down and worship a lump of wood, even if it was overlaid with gold. They would only worship their own God. That would be Yahweh or Jehovah. So the king gets extraordinarily angry, and he says to heat up the fiery furnace 7 times hotter than before. He instructs the strongest men from his army to bind up these 3 Hebrews with all their clothes on, their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, everything. They were bound up and thrown into the furnace. Now, this fiery furnace was so hot that the men who threw them in died instantly. So the 3 Hebrews should have been dead before they fell on the floor, but they weren't. And the king was astonished, and he's thinking to himself, well, how is it that they're still walking around in there? And he says to his attendants, how many men did we throw into the fiery furnace? And they said 3. And he said, but there are 4 in there, and one of them looks like a son of God. Well, obviously, the God of these 3 Hebrews had sent his angel. We don't know whether this was the one that was to be the promised Messiah, but it was a very powerful angel from God had come and saved them from the fire. Nebuchadnezzar calls them out, and the amazing thing is, now, if you've ever built a bonfire in your garden, or had a bonfire for any reason, you will know that all your clothes will smell of smoke. Your hair will smell of smoke. You'll have to wash everything. But these 3 Hebrews came out of that fire, and there was no scent of smoke at all. Nothing. They had been completely protected from this fire. How did God do that? I don't know. I don't know how he did it, but he can do anything. So when we face these very difficult trials, which we will when the end of the world comes, remember these stories because they really happened. And remember that our God can do anything. We will go through difficult times. They will be scary, but our prayers will be heard and we will get through them. Now, Nebuchadnezzar then gave an order to all his subjects that they were to honour the God of Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah. And he didn't learn much because he said, if you don't honour this God, you'll be torn limb from limb. So he still had a bit to learn. And if you want to read what happened to him, it's in Daniel chapter 4. Another good story, another lesson for all of us not to be proud, to rely on our God, our Father, give him the honour and the praise, because nothing is impossible for him. We can rely on him greatly. So God will be with you. Take care and God bless.